Welcome everyone to the Frosty Canucks podcast. I'm your host Jason, along with Steve.
Boner culture.
Boner culture, eh?
Yeah, we're opening on boner culture this week.
Yeah, there was quite the spark on Twitter about a certain something.
Yeah, holy shit, this stuff's been funny as fuck to me. So we are recording on the 17th. Horizon, I already forgot the name of the sequel's dumbass
Forbidden
name.
West.
Forbidden West. Horizon Ghibli Wibblies comes out tomorrow. And that's already had like a bunch of, and I'm going to, air quotes, you guys can't see me with my fucking like unimpressed face. Have you ever seen that Justin Timberlake gif where he's looking at people like really unimpressed? That's the face I have right now. And some air quotes. The fucking controversy that has been going around where a bunch of men who have never ever interacted with a woman before in their entire existence. Otherwise, I can't fathom how they've come up with this assessment, but they are extremely mad with the way she looks because apparently a ginger woman running around in the desert shouldn't have freckles and fucking like sunburn all the time. But because the graphics in the PS5 are so advanced, there's just so many teraflops that our tiny human minds cannot comprehend.
What the fuck are you talking about?
I don't know. But there's like actually peach fuzz on the model. And I'm like, oh, peach fuzz. That's like a cool, needless extra thing to add on to a character's face.
Yeah,
But, that's neat.
Very neat. Here come the men out of their caves.
Yeah,
What?
and then out of their caves crawl the troglodytes. Why does Aloy have a beard? And it's just like, have y'all ever been within like even a foot of another human being? Everyone has peach fuzz there. I mean, like most guys, when they get older, it transitions over to being like beard hair. But I can only grow like a goatee, so like on the sides of my face, I still have like a bit of fucking peach fuzz. I know you have like full on like caveman beard, so it's not obviously the case for you, but yeah, I genuinely am like, what the fuck? When I saw that, that led me down a whole ass rabbit hole of other, like, I'll just say embarrassing, like, man moments.
Embarrassing takes.
Yeah, so, like, one of them was Jade was added into Mortal Kombat 11, and they kind of changed up her outfit so it wasn't so much, like, so boobalicious, I'll say. And someone was just like, oh, the fucking, like, SJWs are removing sex appeal from Mortal Kombat. This is a fucking crime against humanity. And someone's like, hey, like, Mortal Kombat has a ton of cosmetic thingamajiggers you can just like unlock for the characters and change their look that way. There's probably something you'll like. And the guy's like, for the sake of boner culture, hopefully the sexy outfits are still a viable option via the gear customization. I want to ironically start using the word boner culture, but I'm pretty sure no one will be able to tell that I'm using it ironically.
Therefore you shall not.
Yeah, therefore I not shall not, it's just I cannot.
Fair.
But yeah, that one was one where I'm like, God damn, if people could hear the way I say it, man. Oh yeah, I'm a very big proponent of boner culture. Fucking holy shit, that's the funniest ass thing I think I've ever read. And then on top of that, I also found this other one because someone was like, I feel like Aloy has a beard, or why does Aloy have a beard is going to go down in history alongside vagina bones. And I'm like, what the fuck is vagina bones? And I found the tweet. I genuinely could not tell you what anime weeb game this is from, but there's like...
It says it up top.
Does it?
Tokyo Mirage.
Oh, it's Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Holy shit, I'm blind.
You were really honed in on for the vagina bones.
Yeah, I was really honed in on vagina bones, yeah. No, so when they brought Tokyo Mirage Sessions over from Japan, there was a number of things they changed so it would be less gross. And one of the things they did was they shrunk down some of the characters' bust sizes, which they note here in the tweet. The guy's like, not only did they remove her cleavage, but they also removed her vagina bones. Oh, fuck. So, for our listeners, I'm going to include a fucking link to this tweet, because this tweet's an absolute banger of a tweet. But for those who don't want to click onto the article or whatever, what the guy is referring to is kind of like on, like, when really thin people, you can kind of see like an outline of the bottom part of their abs and like the pelvis bone around their waist.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's referring to. So in the Japanese version, you can see like a little bit of the bottom of her abs around and like around where her pelvis would be, and they just got rid of that in the North American version, probably so that it doesn't look like her pants need to be pulled up. even though the character model very clearly still looks like she needs to pull her pants up a little bit. But I mean, I guess not really even the problem with pulling your pants up. There's no pants to pull up. That's the issue. She's barely wearing anything. But yeah, I thought that was the whole, like, the vagina bones. That's another thing I want to start using ironically, but again, I don't think people would know that I'm taking the fucking piss every time I use it. Oh yeah, since the vagina bones were removed. That one I actually sent to Miranda, and she started howling laughing. She thought that one was very funny.
Again, I don't know what to say to that.
I mean, there's two, I think, appropriate responses to this. One is that you can look at this very disapprovingly and question how you're going to get through the rest of your life where people this stupid are continuing to exist on the planet. Or you can laugh. I have chosen to laugh, mostly because the first option would be too fucking depressing.
We're already living it, so.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I have to just fucking laugh at stuff, otherwise I just want to jump off a fucking building. Anyway, on that note, what do we actually have on the docket this evening?
Nintendo came swinging in February with a Nintendo Direct, revealing all sorts of interesting stuff.
I am going to be completely honest. Until you said that now, I completely forgot the Direct happened.
Oh, you clearly didn't find it all that interesting.
Yeah, no, I did. It was mostly like old games being remastered and like weeb shit, so some of the games they showed were both of those things.
Exactly.
What is it? Year 6, I think we're entering for the Switch. It came out in year 5.
2017. It should be celebrating its, 5th birthday.
Yeah, so it is going to be entering year 6 this year. I did have that correct. Yeah, I feel like most of the time Nintendo only ever releases, one entry of a particular franchise on a system. That's not 100% true, but...
It is a commoner trend, yeah.
Yeah, well, they don't want to replace their games with a new entry, even though it could be argued that they do that when they go to new hardware anyway. But without any kind of new technology or new hardware gimmick, there's not as much room for them to truly fuck around and create something that they could loosely pass off as being
for them,
new. Yeah.
But there are some bad exceptions, like Star Fox Zero.
Yeah, well, we'll not talk about that game. Actually, no, we'll mention that game later. That's a very good example for something I want to bring up later. We're at the point now where after 5 years, basically every major Nintendo franchise that hasn't gone into the dungeon has been rolled out.
In some capacity, yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think we're slated to get much more in terms of what the Switch has to offer for new games, which kind of sucks. I don't feel like the Switch has enough oomph to it yet, still.
It had a lot of oomph going into its first year, but...
Nintendo blew its entire load in the first year. I feel like the only other thing that came out on the Switch that had even the same kind of impact as the 1-2 punch of Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey was in March 2020 when Animal Crossing released. Oh, and Smash Brothers. But yeah, other than that, I feel like the Switch has been fairly underwhelming, and a lot of the times I've only seen a lot of people ranting and raving about it because of the people who I interact with on the regular. Not calling anyone out in particular with that statement. It's just, a lot of y'all are Nintendo fans, and that means that I just happen to see a lot of Nintendo-related stuff. No biggie. So yeah, I don't know. The Switch it's been okay, but I definitely, with the state of this Direct and some of the other ones that have come out, I feel like you're definitely starting to see Nintendo is losing some steam. The Kirby game looked cool though. I still think that game looks cool. I don't want to pay $90 for it, but it looks cool.
I don't want to pay $90 for it either, but yeah, no, that one looks pretty cool.
I liked when he ate a vending machine and he started shooting people with fucking pop cans. That was funny.
Yeah, that was probably honestly one of the highlights of that Direct.
Yeah.
Kirby just can turn into everything.
So there was that, and I think that was the only big Nintendo developed title. Am I wrong in that?
Well, there's Fire Emblem Warriors: The Three Hopes.
Yeah, but that's being developed by Tecmo Koei, who
I believe so.
Fundamentally only ever put out Warriors games. Or Musuo games for Maz, who's going to crucify me later for calling them Warriors games again on the podcast. Shit. Piss and shit.
I mean, it doesn't help that
that's in the title.
Referred to as that in English, but yeah.
Yeah, I know Ian's really excited about that. I genuinely hope that it actually delivers on its potential instead of being another Age of Calamity situation, which is to say that Age of Calamity
Yes.
had a lot of potential from a storytelling perspective to fill in the blanks of Breath of the Wild, which I am now acquainted with because I have played that game, and the most interesting stuff that happens in that game, as far as story goes, all happened in the past. Instead of doing any of that, Age of Calamity reportedly just sort of has time-traveling ghosts or some shit. I don't know. Fairly underwhelming is the overwhelming opinion that I seem to gather from
That's
people.
what I heard as well. Yeah.
From at least a story perspective. And then, so hopefully the Three Houses Warriors, actually has some more story chops to it, especially because I feel like when it comes to Fire Emblem, a lot of the people who play and enjoy those games do so specifically because of the writing in them. How good that writing is on a game-by-game basis varies wildly based on the very small sample size that I have played. But I know a lot of people really liked Three Houses because of the characters and the character writing. So I am hopeful for Ian and other people who are excited about that game that it actually delivers on its potential instead of being yet another game in a long-running series that I'm going to say doesn't
Are very,
really...
very samey.
Yeah, it doesn't really ever capitalize on the story potential of
Honestly,
what they...
I think that Persona 5 Strikers is the best thing that collaboration that they've done.
True.
In terms of a story.
And I forgot that exists, and that...
Because it actually has a story.
Yeah, that actually points to the potential for for it to be a Persona 5 Strikers instead of a fucking Age of Calamity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing. I forgot about that, but that actually means that this might not just be a huge fucking disaster. Hopefully.
I just wonder if it's less for Tecmo Koei and it's more on the
Atlas?
Well, Atlas for Persona 5, but
yeah.
It's Intelligent Systems for Fire Emblem.
Yeah, I question the ability of that studio to actually deliver on this. Well, so little known fact, I forget where I read this, but I came across information at one point. I think it was just in an article. But what it stated was that there's kind of two factions inside of Intelligent Systems when it comes to Fire Emblem games. And they're divided on, I'll call it like Faction A wants to create games that have compelling narratives and are mechanically interesting because that's what people like about Fire Emblem. And Side B says it needs to have big titty waifus because that's why Awakening did well, and that's why every Fire Emblem game afterwards did well. Which is why you keep seeing Fire Emblem games released and they have more grand stories, but then they also have this weirdo weeaboo pet your wife shit, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So it seems to be, at least the way it's described, is that there's a group that want to make compelling strategy games, and there is a group that want to make horny games. And no one side has managed to prevail over the other. I think that the horny people, though, are definitely gaining a little bit more momentum. I say that specifically because of Fire Emblem. I want to say it's called Heroes. Is that the mobile game?
Yes.
They just keep releasing new versions of characters in like fucking bikinis and shit, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the horny people know what's up. They know how to make money. Yeah.
Anyway.
Speaking of horny people, they also announced Xenoblade Chronicles 3. All I know about that game is
Pyra.
Yeah, well, that and there's a sex Furby who has, or not a sex Furby. There's a pedophile Furby who has a sex robot in the second one, and he sounds like Jar Jar Binks.
Meh, 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 meh.
I don't have very good opinions of the people who play these games. Okay, so just picture this from my perspective, right? All I've ever seen from these games are cringeworthy, terrible British accents that are clearly done by people who are not British speaking, and then a bunch of women running around in underwear beating the shit out of stuff with swords. Which sounds cool, but then I'm like, this game is from Japan. There is no way they're not all supposed to be like 14 years old. You are all gross pedophiles if you enjoy this game. But people are excited that there's a third one coming.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I feel like the Direct just showed off a bunch of old fucking like JRPG stuff that they're remastering, all of which is going to be dumped on Steam at some point in the future. I think Triangle Strategy is going to end up on Steam as well at some point.
Oh, for sure. If If it's following suit with the Octopath Traveler, yeah.
Even Bravely Default 2's on the fucking...
And that too, yes.
Yeah, so it's like Square just dumps everything on Steam eventually.
I forgot that Advanced Wars 1 and 2 was delayed from December.
Yeah, I thought it came out already.
Yeah, I remember.
And no one was talking about it, and I'm like, okay, that's exactly what I expected.
Yeah.
No, apparently it hadn't come out yet.
Well, you'll eventually find out if you're right in, I guess, April and May.
I'm not paying fucking $80 to play a game I can still play on a GBA cart. I'm sorry. I did like that they gave Grid a cowboy hat, though. Finally. He doesn't have a cowboy hat for some reason in the fucking first 2 games, at least. I don't think I gave him a cowboy hat in the 3rd game either. Hold on, I gotta Google this. Okay, no, they gave him a cowboy hat in not Days of Ruin, Dual Strike. In Dual Strike, he's got a cowboy hat, which makes sense. This character is clearly a fucking cowboy. He walks around with a revolver and talks like he's from Bumblefuck nowhere. It makes no sense that in the first 2 games he's got like this weird military cap thing on. No. He's got to have the cowboy hat, 100%. This man is a cowboy. He says tarnation, man, like he's a cowboy.
Yeah.
What in tarnation are you making so much noise about, Olaf? They're invading our borders. Oh, don't you worry about it. We'll just shoot our heads off. Grit, why are you always such a lazy buffoon? Grit is my spirit animal. He's my favorite character.
Clearly.
Well, he has the strongest artillery units, and artillery can just clown on everything in that game. It's hilarious.
That's very true.
The trade-off is that you actually have to think ahead. Well, it's not like
What?
a very big... That's not a very big trade-off in a game. It's a strategy game, so...
Well, I'm pretty sure in this one they even allow you to just reverse turns now.
Okay, whatever.
There's also No Man's Sky coming to Switch.
I'm sure that won't run like dog shit. It looks very different from...
Yeah, exactly the same thought.
Just like the trailer was obviously what you'd see on a real console. But it's just like, wow, this game actually looks like it delivered on what it was supposed to be. It just took them 7 years to do it.
Yes.
I mean, on one hand, I want to say good job on them for not just taking the money and running, but also this game should not have come out. Like, it 100% should not have come out in the state it did at all. Complete and utter horseshit. There was no way they were ever going to... Even if they hadn't lost a bunch of their stuff from their office unfortunately being flooded, there's no reason that their game should have been released in the state. Like, even if that hadn't happened, they would not have been able to release it in even remotely the same state as it is today, or even in a state that I think would have been acceptable.
I mean, we could say the same thing about Cyberpunk, but it finally released its updated patch.
Does it work now on consoles?
Well, like, it's the PS5 and Xbox Series versions finally are out. I think it updated stuff for PC users as well.
Neat.
But that took quite a bit of time to get out.
I have a feeling that history will... I'm not going to say it's going to be mean to Cyberpunk, but I don't feel like it's going to have the same kind of... You know how there's some games that are revered for their ability to patch up issues and become much better games over time?
Yeah, like No Man's Sky, for example.
Yeah, or even Rainbow Six Siege. That's like another example where that game actually got more and more and more popular as it became more and more polished over time. I don't necessarily think that Cyberpunk is going to be one of those games. I feel like it's just going to be forgotten about, which is also unfortunate because like, there's some potential room there for it to be a cautionary tale in some regards with the way that it launched being kind of the complete dog shit. But while The Witcher 3 has a long-standing legacy and is widely regarded and positively across the industry and is relatively respected by both the critical and the consumer base, I don't feel like Cyberpunk will ever be remembered in any kind of light. It might be remembered as, oh yeah, that was that weird buggy game that came out with 2 penises or whatever. I kind of think that over time it'll be mostly forgotten.
Probably, unless this patch does any damage control. Or
yeah, I don't know. It could happen.
It's hard to say.
Genuinely could happen. I could be wrong on that, but...
But I think one of the more interesting things that they revealed was that MLB The Show was coming to Switch.
Oh, I'm not surprised by that at all.
I'm not surprised either, just because it came to Xbox, but...
Yeah, well, it went on Xbox last year because MLB said, we want that money. And Sony's like, and they're like, if you don't put it on Xbox, I swear to God, we will rip this rug out from underneath you and go to a different publisher.
And then they're like, well, that worked the first time. Switch.
Yeah, and they made a...
Did it come out on Switch? Oh, sorry, not Switch. PC yet?
I don't actually know.
I don't think it did. That'll be their next one.
It is not on Steam. So the big thing with MLB is I got a buddy of mine, and I don't want to misquote this, but I'm pretty sure it was Keith who said it. And he said MLB Show is a sports game with the most microtransactions that no one talks about.
Yes.
Apparently, it is so much worse than every other game, but for some reason just gets a free pass every year it comes out, despite that. So the big win, specifically with having MLB on, I think we talked about this last year, actually.
We have
I'm pretty
talked
sure
about
we did.
this, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be on Game Pass, and the real win there is the fact that it gets in people's hands and they're just making money off of the microtransactions. Same fucking shit on the Switch. Just release the game, make most of the money off of the microtransactions. That's the real win. And being in more players' hands means there's more people who are susceptible to microtransactions, and, then you'll make more money.
Yay!
Yeah, no shit.
Oh, yeah. I'm just scrolling through the list. And Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pack. Fuck you guys. You're not getting a Mario Kart 9.
Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about when I said that they don't release, or they won't release a new game if they have an existing game that already exists. They're not going to release Mario Kart 9 if Mario Kart 9 is just going to be Mario Kart 8 with different courses. I saw some people actually get really pissed off that it was going to be $30 or $40 of DLC instead of a full-ass $70 game, to which I kind of, what's wrong with you people? I think this is brilliant.
I think it makes a lot of sense as well.
If people are clamoring for more content for this game, then just give them more content.
Well, and it's also free with the Nintendo Switch Online, which you're going to have if you're playing Mario Kart.
Well,
because you're most likely playing online.
Isn't it the expansion thing that has it, though? Not the regular one?
Yeah, the expansion one. Yeah.
So it's the expensive one, which sucks.
Or you buy it for $25.
Yeah, but I don't want to give Nintendo money for online. That's criminal. It's a crime against my wallet, my sanity, against the goodwill of individuals.
Fair enough. But
against God.
But yeah, it doesn't make sense to split the player base between Mario Kart 8 and Mario Kart 9.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought this was a brilliant move, especially because in some cases they're just... I guess I shouldn't say it. I'm just saying in some cases they're just reusing old courses, but that's not really true because they're like every time all the old courses that exist in Mario Kart 8, because I've played it on the Wii U, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not obviously, but I have played it on the Wii U. That's actually the game I bought the Wii U with. The old courses have been adapted in most cases for the gravity mechanics, so the courses are actually marginally different from what they looked like in the original iterations. That's not true for all of them. Some of them are a lot more faithful, but definitely some of them have had some massive reworks done onto them, which has made them into visually quite new. Like, you can still kind of see what they came from if you're familiar with the original track. The updates that came with Mario Kart 8, or 8D in this case, are they're quite noticeable, I think.
Gotcha.
Is that all we got to say about the Direct?
Yeah, I think so.
Did anything jump out at you from the Direct at all, just in general, or yeah, obviously
I did have a good chuckle when Nintendo Switch Sports was shown.
Okay, as someone who actually enjoyed Wii Sports, that was one of my favorite games in the Wii.
Yeah, I just didn't think they were gonna finally bring it back.
Yeah, I did genuinely think about it for a couple seconds when I saw that, and then I went, nah, the Switch's motion controls are dog shit. I already know they're dog shit from when I played No More Heroes. Trying to jerk the fucking thing off to fill up the lightsaber again, and it was barely responsive. It was awful. Holy fuck.
I think because No More Heroes, the first one, that had a release on the PS3, it also had motion controls. I'm pretty sure you had to just shake the controller up and down.
Yeah, that's fundamentally what was happening in this. It's just the Joy-Cons are very, very finicky about it, or maybe I was just jerking them off too quickly. I don't know.
So yeah, this one comes with badminton, volleyball, soccer.
Okay, why does it come with tennis and small people tennis? Badminton is just tennis for small people.
I don't know.
That is quite literally what I said to Miranda when I'm like, they're like, oh yeah, it's got tennis and badminton. And I shouted, why do they put tennis for small people in?
Because it's easy to program, probably.
Well, they already had most of the source code for it. Fuck. But like, then I think about it.
But they didn't have the source code for golf, though.
Yeah, which is big miss there. They already have Mario Golf, so they probably don't want to, dump out the golf stuff.
They're just delaying.
The only rationale I can think of for that is that like maybe badminton is more popular or is extremely popular in Japan.
Maybe.
Versus like tennis, which is more internationally popular. This is going to be like a thing that Maz will probably tell me about in post after he listens to the podcast. I genuinely don't know, but I would if badminton is more popular in Japan. But I know tennis is. Well, I don't know tennis is popular on an international scale, but I feel like it is. They said they have soccer in this as well, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the most popular sport, period. So one of the most popular sports anyway. They don't have cricket, which is extremely popular in one country that happens to have 1/6 of the world's population. I will say, just because I have a lot of really good memories from playing Wii Sports. Because like Wii Sports is a half decent game. It's probably one of the best games on the Wii, and you got it for free with the Wii.
Yeah, no, it was. It's also like the easiest way to show your relatives. What's a video game? What's a video game, Jason?
Tennis was
you
okay.
You want to play tennis? You want to play bowling?
Yeah, bowling was really good. The bowling was really fucking good.
Bowling was simple to do anyway.
Yeah, the golf wasn't bad either. Baseball and tennis were both kind of simplistic. And then there was the boxing, which was not the greatest demonstration of that technology. But
no,
you get a hell of a workout from doing it.
And the Wii Sports games were the reason that they added wrist straps.
Honestly, the
so
reason
many
they added
broken TVs.
I was gonna say there's also the reason they added the condoms as well. You have no idea what I'm talking about.
That's for what, the Wii Motion Plus stuff?
Yeah. So when they not only did they redesign the wrist straps so the wires on them were thicker so they wouldn't snap, they changed the deuter that you used to adjust them so that it would clip into place so that it wouldn't become loose after being jostled around during play. And on top of that, they started releasing the condoms for the controllers. This was a giant spongy, it's like a jelly plastic kind of thing. And then they had them for the regular controllers, and they, I believe, only packaged Wii Motion Plus kits with them. So instead of having a little bit of thing that you just plug into the bottom, you actually had to slip it into the giant silicone condom before you could actually use Wii Motion Plus. Yeah, when you took those, if you whipped them at anything, it was such a big, like the design of it was such that it would absorb most of the force, which would protect the controller first off, and it would protect whatever it hit. So you could actually throw it at your TV and it probably wouldn't break, thanks to this extra layer of protection. If you hit it at a certain angle, it definitely might be able to, or scratch up the TV. But in general, it was a great way for them to not have to deal with class action lawsuits regarding how many fucking people broke their dumbass TVs. There are certain things that I want to blame companies for, and I'd be like, oh yeah, having like a cheap, shitty wrist strap on the Wii controllers at launch, that's definitely something that Nintendo is responsible for. But then, like, there's some other things where I see people who were clearly not even wearing the wrist straps. That's why I started putting like the warning at the start of every single game, being like, please wear the wrist strap before you play, so they weren't legally responsible anymore. Because there's some people who weren't wearing wrist straps who would whip their fucking controllers at the TV, and I'm like, okay, that's not Nintendo's fault. Like, come on. Oh, you didn't warn them. Oh man, this is like the fucking people who are like, you gotta warn people not to take a toaster into the shower. Like, what the fuck?
Caution, hot drink.
Yeah. Well, no, the hot drink one.
Well, I know
that one's legit. People meme on that one, but that lady suffered like 3rd-degree burns and had to have like
it was
$100,000 surgery.
It was super hot. Yeah. No, I know. It was above average on the hot.
It was scolding. The coffee was like 5 times hotter than it should have been. It was ridiculous.
No, I joke about that, but I know that
go look up the fucking McDonald's coffee lawsuit and like actually try and find the fucking, not just like a shitty hot take on it. That suit was actually a good thing, but Nintendo, or not Nintendo, I was gonna say Nintendo fucking turned it into a way to this lady's being a big dum-dum. No, it was fucking McDonald's, the other terrible giant corporation.
Yeah. Well, we want to talk about what Nintendo's doing?
I don't have a whole lot to say on it. Mostly because I'm a rube, and okay, if you don't have, I guess we can just bring it up if people are not
nice
aware.
And short and simple, quick.
Yeah, because we don't have a whole lot to say on this matter. People who are more artistically involved or view the video game industry more artistically might have more to say about it. For that, I would recommend checking out friend of the show, Ian Adventure Rules. He did bring it up on his, or not podcast, his Twitch stream this week. I think there was a pretty okay discussion that happened there with regard to it. But what is it? What are we talking about? Nintendo has announced that they're going to be shutting down the eShop, which means that the
Wii U and
3DS are no longer going to have purchasable digital games, which subsequently caused the resale market for 3DS and Wii U games to go through the fucking roof as far as prices go.
Huzzah!
Huzzah
It's
indeed.
happening all over again, just like when Sony said, no PS3 and PS Vita games for you guys.
Yeah, except I think Nintendo will actually follow through.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
I'm not surprised. They
looked at it and were just like, this is costing us too much, fuck it.
Well, that's just it. Nintendo has not historically supported their systems very well beyond a certain date. And with digital stores being a thing now, they are
Definitely
most
not
definitely, yeah, it's going to be a lot more like, most of the time it just was, oh, okay, they're not producing games or whatever, and they stopped producing the units for this. And people,
Yeah.
it's not like a non-event when it happens because everyone's like, oh, I've moved on to the Wii. I don't care that the GameCube's not in production anymore.
It's less like impactful when it's been like physically stopped.
Yes,
but
versus
when it's been
like
digitally stopped, we've been having this debate go on more and more. Because that's what's interesting is because it's both of Sony's and Nintendo's first systems into digital, and they're like, no, we'll get rid of it now, and no one knows how to react to it yet.
Yeah, who's still buying games in the 3DS?
Some people are clearly, but
and we all know there's only 5 people who own a Wii U, and I'm one of them. So who the fuck's still buying?
Hold on. I own a Wii U as well.
Okay, so we're 2 of the 5 people who own Wii U's. Who are the other 3, and why are they buying digital games still?
I don't know.
And I get some of the arguments that are being made against this sort of thing, but from a business standpoint, because that's where Nintendo's evaluating this decision, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking about it like, yeah, this cost us X amount of dollars to run every year, and it has charitably maybe like 10,000 transactions a year on it.
Yeah, not enough to keep the lights on for the store.
Yeah, or like barely enough to keep like just where it's okay, fuck it, we're gonna shut this down and really kind of push everyone over to the Switch, which is what they really want to do. So that's the other thing, right? Where it's like if you shut off support, then if you turn off the lights to the other thing, it's like okay, well now you have to go to the new thing. So yeah, I don't know. I can see why they're doing it. I question why there is so much outrage from people who are suddenly, I need to buy all these games on the 3DS. And I'm like, but why? If this hadn't been announced, you would have been perfectly fine just like not buying those games.
Yeah, and if Nintendo doesn't want to give you the ability to purchase them, you can just emulate. You didn't hear that from me.
Do what you want because a pirate is free. You are a pirate. Yar har, a pirate is free. That's always been my fucking approach. If I can't find something easily, I just get it alternative ways. Piracy has always been a service problem. I will fucking stand by that shit until I die.
No, I agree. When Australia blocked, what was it?
A number of games because Australia's government's fucking stupid.
Yeah, the best example I remember is Hotline Miami 2, and the devs were just like, fucking pirate it. We don't care.
Yep.
If you can't play it in your country, just pirate it. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
I have respect for that.
Yeah. No, and like that's the other thing is, I'm not going to name names, but somebody who listens to this show frequently pirates games, and it's been my experience that whenever that person enjoys a game, they will usually go out and buy it. They'll like support the dev after the fact.
Or some other like manner, like buy the CD, buy the soundtrack, buy something of merchandise from them.
Yeah, exactly. Will and Miranda, when they were younger, they grew up poor as shit, so they pirated a lot of games too. And I've actually seen both of them pay full price for a number of the games that they pirated that they really enjoyed when they were younger. Not touch them again since then. They like have games on Steam that they bought, and I'm like, why the fuck did you buy this? And like, oh, I liked it a lot when I was younger, and I'm like, okay, and I pirated it, so I wanted to pay for a legitimate copy.
The guilt was eating me up.
Not really. It's more like it's more of an honor system, really, right? Where it's just like, well, I enjoyed this thing a lot. I just didn't have money for it when I was younger, and now I have money, so I'm going to give the developer that money now. I just didn't have it at the time. And there's like an argument to be made for, like, oh, you shouldn't have the thing if you don't have the money for it. But I don't know. There's a lot of studies that have been done with regard to piracy in the games industry, and overwhelmingly they have found that pirating is not lost sales. Pirating is almost always a service problem, not a product problem. And anti-piracy measures like de novo do nothing to stop piracy.
Everyone just celebrates when it's finally been cracked, and the devs are like, oh, we're going to get rid of it. We heard your feedback. It's like, no, you bastards. It's because it finally got cracked and you were just like, fuck it.
We don't want to pay a service fee for something that's not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, these studies have been done and they keep expecting because studies only get published or like widespread published and like distributed if they find the thing that the people paying for the studies want you to find. Remember that anytime a study is announced that shows like a statistic, that study was usually, unless it was performed like academically, which is not done super duper often, most studies are funded by people who are specifically trying to prove a point. But yeah,
Yes.
overwhelmingly, the studies into piracy in video games have shown things that major game publishers didn't want advertised, so they usually just bury the results. They're still available if you go digging for them, though.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, it tends to be honor among thieves, which is to say that most people who I know who have pirated games tend to, if they can later on, they will pay for stuff, and sometimes in extremely generous capacities that you wouldn't necessarily think were necessary. Like, oh, you could pick this game up for half off on Steam or whatever. No, 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 I'm going to wait and buy it at full price. Okay. So, that's always an option. If you have a hankering to play some specific game you can't actually buy on the eShop anymore. And the last time I checked, the emulator for 3DS and the Wii U is pretty okay.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing we're going to do before we move into games we've been playing. This is like an anecdotal thing because I did mention that I wanted to mention it. That's a terrible sentence. Anyway, after Sony announced that they were going to be picking up more games with, I guess not,
Live service.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say live service components. Platinum did that interview where they said, we're getting into making more live service games. And then this past week, they did another interview where I'm going to paraphrase what they said, but it's something like, oh, it's so weird that there's a bunch of Japanese gaming corporations and they never buy up any of these studios. We're over here like, hey, we're making great games. Why won't anyone buy us up? Someone please pay attention to us. And I'm like, man, these two interviews back to back feel like the most desperate attempt for Platinum to be like, Sony, please buy us.
Yeah, no kidding.
Which I just, I don't have much to say about that aside from the fact that I think it's kind of funny. And I also understand why no one has picked up Platinum games. I know a lot of people, when they think of Platinum, tend to think of the really good games that Platinum has put out. But if you look at the amount of games they've put out in the last
There are some stinkers.
Oh, there's more than a fair share of stinkers. They release almost one middling or bad, actively bad title for every one like good title they put out. It's actually insane how many bad titles this company puts out. And I want to actually get the count because I did look at it earlier this week.
I know they made that like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, and it was just
So
middling.
since 2009, which I believe is when the studio, no, it was founded in 2007. They spent 2 years developing Mad World. So yeah, the studio was formed in 2007. So they since 2007, their first few games came out in 2009, and then you have up until 2022, where none of the games listed here have come out yet. But in that time period, which is 10 years and then 2 extra years, so like 12 years, 13 years, they've released 18 different titles, so almost one a year. No, actually, that's more than one a year. I can't think. Also, keeping in mind that they were working on Scalebound, which got canceled, which they poured a significant amount of resources into. But yeah, you've got games on here like Mad World, which was critically acclaimed, Bayonetta, Vanquish, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, Bayonetta 2, Nier Auto Potato. These are games that were generally really well received. Games that weren't necessarily as well received. Legend of Korra, Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, Star Fox Zero. That was the tie-in from earlier. A Wonderful 101, which Wonderful 101 wasn't like bad, but it was kind of like, depending on whose review you read, some people were like, I mean, it's like okay, it's nice that it uses some of the Wii U specific features, but then when it wasn't on the Wii U, people were like, this game's not Platinum's best. Oh, I forgot about Astral Chains and the good one. I think Astral Chains reviewed really well in general.
That one was well received. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's like just as many kind of titles as there has been like good titles. And then on top of that, you have Bayonetta 3, which has not been released yet, which has been in development hell for fuck knows how long. And they're releasing Babylon's Fall sometime, I think, earlier this year. Was it March, April?
It's coming up
And
soonish. Yeah.
yeah, that game looks.
Yeah. It looks.
I don't think it looks great, but that's just the impression I got from the trailers that I've seen so far of it. So yeah, it's like I wouldn't want to buy a studio either if they have like a 50% chance of releasing a steaming pile of shit.
Yeah. I mean, that's not what Sony wants. Sony's are still mad at like what is it, Studio Bend for Days Gone.
Yeah, well, it's an expensive game, and then they released it, and it didn't do what it was supposed to do, which was to sell a bunch of copies.
Well, and be critically well received.
Yeah, well, I can't. People who made Bubsy 3D just fucking, they can't help it if they put out a fucking another turd of a game. That's not a joke. That Bend used to be Acclaim Software. They made Bubsy 3D. That's a thing that is true.
No, I know. I am well aware.
But yeah, that whole series of interviews is very funny. I'll link it in the post if you want to read the full interviews and the quotes. It's not really much other than Platinum looking super desperate to be bought up by somebody. Somebody in this case being Sony, but yeah, somewhat interesting to see a company that was originally founded by people who were pissed off at Capcom now being like, please, big companies, buy us. We need money. We need job security.
Bayonetta 3 is not going to pay for itself.
Yeah, and I think Nintendo's probably getting a little pissed off with how long it's taking for that game to come out, considering they announced it and it was probably supposed to come out back in like 2020.
Oh yeah, that wasn't at the Direct.
Nope.
Shit. Oh dear. Maybe that's the latter half of the year, maybe, if we're lucky.
That game comes out in the later half of this year and still looks as rough as it did the last time they showed it off. I have a feeling that this is going to be the first Bayonetta game that gets kind of its ass handed to it in the reviews. I think there'll still be some people who are like, but it's still Bayonetta, so I love it. But yeah, that game did not look good in what they showed off in that Direct in December, November last year.
Yeah, something like that. All right. So if you're new to the show, we often take a break between the news and games we've been playing. I just had to go and shovel, so I am more frosty than Steve is at the moment. So
yeah, I live in an apartment. I don't have to deal with that shit.
Yeah, and Steve always is running his cat around.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes I run her around while we're actually recording.
Even better.
Well, she went back to sleep. Okay. One thing I have noticed is that God, I've had her for, I guess we're coming up on a year. It'll be a year in May, so it's closer to a year than not. Over that time, she went from being like completely wild banana to being a lesser wild banana. So a lot of the time she'll like fucking... Yeah, well, that helped taking out her reproductive organs. But yeah, she's spends quite a bit of time just sleeping in my lap, which is very nice. Anyway.
Video games. And starting it off with It Takes Two.
Oh, God. Okay, so this is one you were supposed to talk about last time we were recording, but
kind
you actually finished it now?
No.
Oh, my God.
There's a caveat to that. Sarah's work is in lockdown, outbreak again, so...
Again? Fucking again.
It's been like 3 or 4 times at this fucking point. So, I didn't want to bother her with finishing the game till she's out of outbreak. Here's hoping that's eventually. But unfortunately, every time the counter resets when a staff or another person gets infected at her workplace. So it just keeps moving the date. So not fun. Not fun in the slightest. Now, regarding It Takes Two, I think you have to have the right partner for this game for it to be a really enjoyable experience. Like, there are a lot of times where I was enjoying it, like, ooh, that's a really cool idea, or like, oh, that's cool. But my wife is not very good at platformers, and I don't know why she suggested that we play this together.
Yeah, I laughed so hard because when you told me very first thing after you started playing, and you're like, I'm like, how's it going? And you're like, not well. And I'm like, why not? And you're like, my wife is terrible at platformers. She fucking hates them. And I'm like, why the fuck did she say we should play this game then?
I don't know. She had said she had seen the intro part where there's not a whole lot of platforming, or not.
No, it's a 3D fucking platforming game. I mean, there's not 3D.
She didn't realize that as
platforming
much.
stuff. But yeah, it's like fundamentally a game about, like, I mean, it's not hard platforming, but if you just like hate platforming, oh woof, it's gonna be a long ass game.
Yep, she keeps dying. There was one point where I was just waiting for her at the top of, I think it's one of the areas with like the bounces, and she's like, I can't tell what the perspective is, and I'm just looking at my phone, just kind of waiting to see when she finally gets there. And all of a sudden, she just whips the controller up in the air, lands directly in the middle of my chest. I'm like, what the fuck, woman? She's like, you do it.
Jesus Christ.
Just to be clear, she didn't actually mean to like throw it that hard at me.
Yeah,
She just kind of whipped it up in the air, and it just so happened that gravity said, it's time for the sharp point of the PS5 controller to get into
No,
your chest.
she had some fucking legit, pure, primal gamer rage. That's what happened. She whipped the fucking controller, which I'm pretty sure is a thing that probably everyone has done at least at one point in their life when they got really pissed off at a video game.
Yeah.
And they just had no way of expressing their anger, and they maybe hadn't just taken a minute to be like, no, I'm going to turn off the game because this is stupid. I'm going to go for a walk or eat a popsicle or something. I don't know.
I know what you mean.
I've played a couple of fucking platforming games on stream, and people in the chat are always like, oh my god, you're so good at this genre. And I'm like, nah, I just like played platforming games for like 20 fucking years. So you get 20 years of experience doing something, you get better at doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I always feel, and don't any of you motherfuckers take this out of context, I always feel like kind of disabled whenever I play 3D platforming games, because I have such a hard time perceiving depth in a 3D space.
That's Sarah's problem, actually, as well.
I 100%, like, Maz didn't understand what I meant by that.
Though, either.
Yeah, I was like, Maz didn't understand what I meant by that until he watched me play, like, I forget what game it was, but there's some game where he saw me take a jump that I obviously could not make. And with the confidence that I did it, and I was like, well, I died. And he's like, oh, I think I finally understand what you mean when you were saying that. Miranda also didn't understand what I meant by that for the longest time until we were playing Mario Odyssey together. She was the hat. And I went for a jump that I, again, very clearly, very obviously could not make. I was like, oh, well, okay. She's like, what? You couldn't tell that you couldn't make that? I'm like, nah, man. I looked like I could make that jump. And she's like, and I'm like, see, yeah, remember how I said I can't judge 3D spaces correctly? And you're always like, why do you move the camera so much in Sunshine? And I'm like, because I'm trying to figure out what the space looks like in my brain so that I can make sense of the geometry and actually platform properly. Oh, God. 3D games are debilitating. 3D games were a mistake. Anyway, please continue with the woes from It Takes Two. My god.
So yeah, there's just a lot of parts where the platforming is not really agreeable with her.
Yeah.
She definitely likes to play games that are more static with the camera. So what I mean by that is in Stardew, the camera is fixed. You only have to move left, right, up, and down. You don't have to move the camera in a 3D space.
2D games typically have fixed camera angles or forced camera angles such that your perspective is set in a specific way so you can... Yeah. And your controls are oriented around that perspective instead of like 3D games.
Similar for Animal Crossing New Horizons. She loves that.
Yeah, that's fixed as well.
Yes, that's also in a fixed position. So.
But yeah, I'm gonna say it's one of the biggest things that people who play a lot of video games take for granted. I remember when I played a 3D game with a moving camera for the first time, and it was so alienating. And even though I played like a lot of games where you can move the camera in Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine, I had to stop moving Mario to move the camera the first several times I played those games because I couldn't I just couldn't figure out how to like adjust my movements with the camera's movements at the same time.
Yeah, and that's what Sarah's problem is exactly.
I learned how to do that when I was, I want to say like 11 years old, and my neighbor handed me a controller because he wanted to play Call of Duty, and I was like, I don't know how to control this. Because that game, you have to move the camera, because it's your perspective, it's your viewport, right?
Well, yeah.
And your character at the same time.
It's first person.
Yeah. And then after that, like playing that game, my proficiency at doing that, after an entire summer of playing Call of Duty, like for an hour or two every day at my buddy's, or with my neighbor's house, I got a lot better at actually controlling games in 3D. And like a lot of the games I played, because again, that was the Wii era that was like getting into the Wii era of games. Mm. So there was a whole bunch of games I was playing from Nintendo that used mostly fixed camera angles. So again, didn't really have to fuck around with the camera. And it wasn't until I was like 18 or 19. I think I was playing like Tomb Raider from 2013. Mm-hmm. This is in like I don't know when I was 19. Almost 10 years ago now. But I could actually control the camera fully, and I'm like, wait a minute. I can control the camera fully and move at the same time. When the fuck did I learn to do that? Because I never realized that I'd picked that skill up
in
the times I was playing first-person games. Yeah, exactly. So it's not just Sarah, right? Like it's anybody who's
Oh yeah, no.
not experienced that or had the time to build that skill. It's a huge pain in the ass. It's very confusing and super alienating.
Mm-hmm.
It's very unclear versus 2D games with fixed cameras where you're like, oh yeah, I understand. I press the buttons and then my character moves and everything's simple.
Whereas in most games, it's like I move the character forward and I move the camera to the right. The character's gonna go to the right. Wait, what?
Yeah, that's a thing that you have to learn. It
Mm-hmm.
does not necessarily make any like, oh, you're holding forward. You're like, okay, I expect to keep going the same direction even if I'm turning to look in a different direction. You're like, well, that's not how video games work.
Exactly.
I can totally understand if she doesn't have a lot of experience playing games with cameras like, and I think she plays Pokemon too, right?
Yeah, another another.
So that's another game with a fixed fucking camera. Except in Sword and Shield, you can freely move the camera in that open area, but that's like,
That's about it.
yeah, I mean, and how much time do you really spend in the open field? Really?
Well, if you finish the entire Pokedex.
Okay, but like, it's not an actiony type game, so she could do the same thing I was
No.
doing in Mario Sunshine when I was like fucking 10
Stop.
years old, and I just
Yes,
stopped
exactly.
moving,
Stop
moved the
moving.
camera, and
Turn the
then got
camera.
into a
Yeah.
position. Yeah, got into a position where I could see what I was doing, and then continued.
Yeah, I know. So
Fuck,
that's
I
the same.
still do that as an adult now sometimes.
I can't say I do that at all.
Just fix the camera in one angle and be like, all right, this is what I need to get through this thing, and then I gotta swivel it around to the right so I can see what I'm doing for the next thing.
That's one solution.
It's very awkward looking, but whatever. So, am I correct in assuming that you're probably not gonna finish this game?
No, we'll finish it. Sarah's even brought it up once or twice.
Okay.
That was before the her being an outbreak, and well, I just don't want to add any stress level.
So, wifey's still interested in actually finishing it.
Yeah, I mean we're pretty close. We're collecting the pages from that bastard of a book.
Okay,
God,
yeah.
he's such a fucking dick.
He's such a dickhead. He's easily the worst part of the game. God
You
damn.
got to fix your relationship.
God, he's such a dickhead. I mean, it doesn't sound like you're enjoying it that much, but I feel like most of that stems from the fact that you're playing with your wife who's getting really frustrated by the game, and obviously you love your wife, so it's like not going to be really enjoyable when you're sitting next to someone you care about who's just getting really pissed off the entire time you're trying to play a game.
More or less. So there's just a lot of great ideas, and as you've pointed out before, they throw them out at such a quick rate that you're just bouncing between different idea and different idea, and I do love that aspect of it.
It's hard to get bored in. It feels like a game that was made by somebody who has like attention deficit disorder. Just a little bit.
So we got to the part that you cried about, and neither of us teared up at all on that.
Well, obviously
we didn't
you're
feel it
heartless
was very
bastards.
well. Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
No, but that's like
But
one of those things where I wouldn't even say that I feel like that's a scene that would necessarily make everyone sad.
didn't make me feel good.
No,
Neither of us felt good about
no,
it.
it's just
So
that
I agree on
I
that.
felt
But
fucking awful after doing that. Like
yeah.
like legitimately really terrible, and that's why I was
What did we
like,
accomplish? Nothing. Now
yeah,
let's move on to the book breaking that letter into 4 pieces.
yeah, that's what I think really fucking got me there. But I would not like I know I just said like, oh, that means it's heartless, but like, no, like legitimate. I no fucking shade. If anyone else played through that and was like, oh yeah, I didn't really feel like any kind of, I was like, I didn't tear up at all. I was like, okay, sure, like whatever. So when people tell me I'm fucking terrible for not thinking that certain video games are even remotely sad. So
Fair enough.
it's like emotions
I
are
mean,
subjective human experiences, right? So
yeah. If I was playing with someone more familiar with platformer games, I think I'd be enjoying it a bit more. But overall, I think it's a solid game. And it is on the EA Play that had a 3-month deal for $5. So I've officially paid $6 for 4 months of EA Play.
good lord, that's crazy.
Well, they gave that deal. I'm like, okay, that's cool. It also has the entire Mass Effect Legendary collection
Are you gonna play?
on there, so it's like a fucking good
I was
deal.
gonna say you can play that too.
You got like the two best EA games that aren't the sports ones for free ish.
Is Titanfall 2 on there?
Oh, I meant from last year
Oh, okay.
because both those games came out last
I
year.
mean, is Remastered Collection really a game that came out in the year that the collection was released?
Fair point.
There's a whole ass debate I'm not willing to have on that, but
To be fair, there are a lot of improvements in the first game, apparently, from what I've read.
Okay, well, that's something at least.
Because that's 2 and 3 are probably the closest in terms of their original counterparts versus like the collection, but the first one is apparently like we learned our lessons from the second and third game. Let's, for the love of God, fix the first one.
That's
to
fair.
a certain degree.
Yeah, that's fair. I do appreciate, well, I shouldn't say appreciate because I want to say appreciate later in that sentence. I do like how you appreciate the design aspects of It Takes Two, even if you're just suffering through the game.
Yeah.
I had to think about what words I wanted to use there. So obviously don't do a whole lot of the time when I'm on this podcast. Probably should do that a little more often.
Save me some editing.
Yeah, it would actually. People don't know,
okay.
but Jason has to edit out when I'm a complete degenerate sometimes on the podcast. Okay, so I guess that would bring me to or I guess us, not me, to the Trials of Fire. So I spent most of the last 2 weeks playing Guilty Gear, but I'm not going to talk about Guilty Gear Strive again. So I did play in an all-May tournament, and it was a fucking disaster. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
It was a very funny story, though.
Yes, I did, I think, well enough in it. But the specifics of how well I did is a little bit murky because the tournament was a fucking disaster. But I guess I can say I won 2 of the matches I played and I lost 2 of the matches. So in a version of the tournament, I went 2-2, which is fine. That's not what the final score looks like. There's a reason for that. Anyway, so yeah, Trials of Fire. Because I was playing a lot of Guilty Gear, but I was playing like too much Guilty Gear, so much so that I wasn't enjoying it as much. It's a game where it's more fun for me when I just like sit down and play like an hour or like an hour, like 60 minutes or like 40 minutes to like 90 minutes. If I play like 3 hours of it straight, yeah, I can play 3 hours of it straight, but it's like it has like a diminishing return of funness after like the 90-minute mark.
I get that, yeah.
Where it's just like, it's just so intense and so involved that when you play it for a really long period of time, you just start getting like worse because your body's like, you're being exposed to the same stimuli for so long. You start missing combos. You start making like really obvious mistakes, and you get frustrated because you're missing combos and making really obvious mistakes, and then that causes you to make more mistakes, and you make, and then you get more frustrated, and you make more mistakes. So it's just like the funness drops off, but like in that period where you're performing at your absolute best, it's still fun. So I was like, okay, I need to like actually play some of the other fucking games I bought instead of just sitting down and playing Guilty Gear and turning into a fucking vegetable in front of my computer. And like not eating and forgetting to fucking feed the cat and feeding her late or whatever. I have always fed the cat. The cat will not let me not feed the cat. I've not necessarily fed myself. So that left me with a couple of games from the Steam sale. I tried one and hated it and tried to refund it, and Valve told me to eat my ass. But I started playing Trials of Fire because of that, and I had a lot of fun with it so far. I just started playing it this past week. I played it on Monday and Tuesday, and I think that's it. And I put like fucking 14 hours into it in those 2 days, which should tell you...
Yeah, that's quite a bit.
They should tell you a lot about how much of a degenerate I am, and also how late I was playing those games. But yeah, it's a really fun game. It is another roguelike card game to join my collection, my menagerie of roguelike card games. It's got a few systemic mechanical type changes that are different than what I have dealt with in other card games, and getting my head around those changes was actually a huge barrier to being able to win my first run. So in most card games I've played, every turn you get a specific amount of energy for which you can use to play cards, and cards will have an energy cost on them, right? Pretty standard concept. You'll have like Slay the Spire, you have 3 energy every turn. You can play up to 3 energy worth of cards, or you can have cards that maybe give you more energy, or using them in specific ways may make them not cost any energy or whatever. In this, you start off every turn, and there are a few cards that give you energy accumulation, but otherwise you start off every turn with 0 energy. One of the main unique mechanics, or at least it's unique to me, I don't know if other games have utilized it, but you have to discard cards to get energy. So you discard cards from your hand, and every time you discard a card, you get 1 energy. So like that immediately changes up how you think about constructing your deck and playing your hand turn to turn, because even cards that are useless have a purpose, because they can be sacrificed to play other cards. So that change was like really weird because I'm used to like trimming out like, oh, this card's useless, just get rid of it. But it's like in this game, well, hold on a second, that card that's kind of useless might actually be kind of useful in certain circumstances. And then like the other thing is that instead of just being like in Slay the Spire, you have it's just static, right? You have like you're on the one side, the enemies are on the other side. You play cards, you aim your attacks, whatever. Or in like Monster Train, you put down, you got like the 3 lanes, and you have to defend all 3 lanes. In this, there's a board put down, and you have to move your pieces around, and each of your pieces represents like a different hero, and then the enemy pieces will move around as well, and then different attacks have different ranges as well. So like there's an entire board aspect you have to consider as well for positioning and spatial based challenges. And I thought you were just going to be able to like every turn you'd have like a set amount of movement and a set amount of energy. No, not only does sacrificing cards give you energy, sacrificing cards gives you movement, and those actions are mutually exclusive. So you can sacrifice a card, and you can choose to move your hero, or you can choose to stockpile energy to spend on playing cards. There are some cards that just naturally allow you to move, and some of them don't cost anything. And in fact, there are a number of movement cards where it's like move your hero, when the default movement's like 2 spaces. So it's like move your hero and gain +1 energy. And it's like, okay, this is like, all the heroes start off with 2 of those cards in their deck. So you already have like some basic movement and energy accumulation cards right away, thanks to that, which is really nice. But yeah, normally if you want to move and you just have like a nothing but attack cards in your hand, you're like, I gotta sacrifice a card from my melee warrior so that I can move them into position so they can actually be adjacent to an enemy so they can actually attack that enemy, because right now they're like completely out of range and I can't do anything with them. So like that system right there already introduces like a ton of interesting decisions and wrinkles to what I thought was going to be a really straightforward card game, because you have to think about like, what cards do I actually want to play? How much energy do I need to accumulate? Do I need to sacrifice a card to move a hero into position?
So is it like wise to have kind of almost shitty cards in the deck?
I wouldn't say shitty cards, but it does help to recontextualize cards so that if you have a card that's maybe not necessarily the best under every circumstance, you can still be like, well, this card still has a purpose. So you have a starter deck of 9 cards. The cards are based on whatever class the hero is, and as you play through the campaign, the heroes will level up, and when that happens, you have the ability to draft a new card, and when you draft a card, you have to replace an existing card from your starter deck of 9 cards with it. Or you can optionally say, I don't want any of those cards, I'd rather upgrade one of my existing cards. Either or. So like in that way you can actually get more cards in your deck. You're stuck with 9. You can actually forget cards, like the ability you can reduce down from that 9 to a smaller number, but you can't add beyond that 9 base cards. Where you get extra cards from is from gear. So you got 3 party members, and when they're on the board they're actually like fighting other warriors or bandits or whatever, but when you're not in combat, you're actually exploring an overworld map, and while you do that you can find a gear from just like randomly going through ruins, helping out random people and who you happen upon in your journey for like side quests. It's a lot more simple than it probably sounds. When I say it like that, it probably sounds more like RPG-ish, but it's very, very simplified, like kind of just click through the text boxes, the lore doesn't really matter kind of stuff. Or you can buy gear from villages if you happen to find a village along the way. And each of the pieces of gear you find will put new cards into your deck based on what gear you're wearing. And the higher rarity tier the gear is, the more cards it dumps in. So for example, you could find a helmet and it might give you a skill that allows you to draw 2 cards and discard one of them. And it'll be like a 0 cost card. But then if you get like a rare version of that helmet, so it uses like the fucking system that Diablo popularized. It's in basically every game that has loot. So it's like untiered, which is, or like white.
Yeah. I know.
Green, and then blue, and then purple, and then orange.
Yes.
So like if you get a purple piece of gear, instead of it just having the 1 card, it'll have like 2 extra cards. and they'll be like, the rarity of those cards will be higher. So there's like the chance of if you get like the white or like the green version of something where it'll have like the basic skill that this particular helmet has every single time, and then it'll have like one other card. So I keep saying skill, I mean card. So it'll have like the basic card that it always has, and it'll have like another card. If you get the purple version of that helmet, it'll have the basic card, and then it might have like a different card and then an additional card. So it'll actually give you 3 different cards. Plus, it'll also improve the armor rating on your hero, which is handy because armor regenerates between every single fight. So it's basically like a regenerating health bar, which is very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Health is something you have to spend resources to recover. Armor is not. This whole kind of like meta-y level of progression outside of the card game where you're thinking about like, okay, what is the best piece of gear to put on my particular character, not just based on how much armor it gives them, but also if you get like, okay, does this synergize with the build that I'm going for, right? And like part of the builds you'll go for will maybe depend on what early armor you find. One run I did, I made my sorcerer really, like my whole build was built, like the entire deck was built around making my sorcerer really good. So like I had 2 other warrior type people who were in the party, and their whole goal was to make sure that the sorcerer could just pop off. So like everything I put into their deck was like taunt based skills and supportive defensive skills, and I gave them gear that would give them the ability to do more supportive based stuff with their decks. And then the sorceress had like skills that would do fire damage and ice damage. And there was one that I got that allowed her to do additional fire or ice damage every single. So like if she did fire damage, it would do the same amount of fire damage, but as ice damage to something, and vice versa. So if she ever did ice damage, it would do the same amount of damage and fire damage, which that skill was broken as shit. That's like the kind of things you need to come up with when you're playing this game. Is it's like very heavily synergy based. If you don't find some like really good synergies between cards, this game is like literally impossible to finish. The bosses in the later half of the game are so overwhelming that you have to be OP as shit, otherwise you can't beat them. And that brings me to kind of like the big revelation I had. So I was playing on hard because the game's like, play on hard if you're like really big into card games and you're like good at finding synergies. And I'm like, I've played a couple of card games. I think I can probably figure this out. So I go in, and obviously I don't know any of the cards, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to die. I'm going to like lose these first couple runs. First like 2 runs, I don't even make it to like, I don't even think I made it past like the first fucking boss. 3rd run, make it to the 2nd boss. 4th run, make it to the final boss, and just get my ass like completely handed to me at the final boss. I'm like, fuck! I was so close. But then I had like this kind of thought. Up until that point, I had been building each of my characters and their decks like they were supposed to function individually. And then it kind of dawned on me at that point, like, wait a minute, each of the characters draws their hand, and I get to play them all at the same time, and the resource pool is shared. Why don't I design the entire party like it's one deck instead of thinking about them like individuals? Which is then how I came up with the strategy of like, okay, the mage is going to be the damage dealer, the mage's priority. So like every time there was an option to take their, like a warrior, like something that would help my warriors out, like, oh, there's like this crazy hammer that will allow them to do these like really powerful damaging skills. Or you can take this magic tome that will do like fire spells. I'm like, magic tome, give me the fucking magic tome. So like I prioritized the spellcaster to build up a giant deck full of lots of damaging fire and ice spells. And then my 2 like warrior type people, I actually removed almost all the attacking cards from the one's deck and just had supporting skills in it. And then when it came time to be like, okay, I need to do a shitload of damage this turn, otherwise I am fucked. Well, then it would be like, okay, well, supportive warrior number 1, your entire hand is going in the garbage so I can get mana to actually, or energy to cast as many spells as I can from my mage's hand. So I'd just be like burning cards from these other 2 decks from like their hand, like whatever their hand was at the time. Or like if they had a card that would allow them to draw more cards, I'd be like, all right, play this card to draw more cards and then burn all of those cards and then just start playing all of the mage's combo cards and just have the mage pop off. And when I started thinking about the game in terms of like as a singular team of people instead of having all 3 of the heroes kind of like fighting over resources all the time, it was like night and day. I went from like kind of struggling to get through hard and like barely making it to the final boss to the next day just completely annihilating the final boss in the next run I did. that's where I was like, it's very weird to get into it at first because it's like I'm not used to thinking like having this kind of pool of resources where every card you draw into your hand it has a functional purpose and can be used for like movement or for using other spells. And on top of that, it's like you can draw a really terrible hand with one of your 3 heroes, but then it's like, oh, but like hold on, that's not like my mage is the one who's built for doing damage, so I can just like dump this entire thing into the garbage bin and then just pop off with my mage. And in case anyone was wondering like how random the game gets, not super random. One of the things that is really nice is that at the beginning of the campaign, each of your heroes has 1 redraw per combat, so that you'll sacrifice a bunch of cards the same way you would to get mana, but if you click the redraw button, it takes all of them out of the discard pile and like out of the mana pool, and it will just redraw those cards that you've discarded, and then you can refresh any number of cards from your hand using that to get something that you actually might find more useful in the immediate time. The rarer gear typically have the attribute of adding additional redraws. So by the end of most of my campaigns, most of my heroes have anywhere between 4 and 6 redraws per combat. By that point, you might have a 20 card deck on each of your different heroes. But if you're like, oh, well, I know I've played like these 5 cards already, and I obviously see these like 4 cards in my hand right now. Well, statistically speaking, I have a pretty good chance of drawing this one card that would be really useful right now. I think I'm going to try and gamble to draw this card. And you can do that kind of risk assessment and take those kind of gambles and redraw cards several times throughout combat, which does allow you to get the, maybe not the perfect card, but in some cases you can in fact draw the perfect card you might need at this exact moment to really pop off with a combo and keep those crazy synergies going. It's a very, very fun game. It just requires you to spend a little bit of time like learning the game's mechanics and kind of thinking about them and getting your brain around them. But once you do, holy fuck, it's a fantastic game. Highly recommend it to people who really enjoy card games. As I was kind of getting at, there is like you do explore a world map and you are supposed to be playing like a band of heroes and there's some like lore type stuff, but I haven't done any of the lore quests. I've just done like the standard game mode, but I found that aspect of the game is very undercooked compared to the mechanics of the actual card game. So I'd recommend this more on the basis of, hey, do you like cards? So I gotta squirm my cat for a second here. It's invading the desk and being a shit. So yeah, I recommend it more on the basis of like, hey, if you enjoy card games, check this out. I don't know if I'd recommend it on the basis of if you liked Slay the Spire but wished Slay the Spire had like more lore and storytelling, then maybe check this out. I think I want to dick around with some of the quote-unquote lore quests to see what they add, because as far as I've done with the campaigns, I've seen like a ton of repeating events, basically always run into like the same set of events every single time I play them. To me, so far, it feels like Slay the Spire, even though it's maybe trying to take itself more seriously in terms of story and world building and stuff. But I don't know. It's just the standard random game mode, so I kind of want to check out the ones that are specifically denoted as being like lore driven to see if they actually have more kind of story, world building, RPG type stuff that I know that at least Ian kind of denoted at one point that he would kind of have appreciated if that kind of stuff was in Slay the Spire instead of it just being a straight, you play a card game every single time. It's a fun game.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you all very much for joining us this episode of the Frosty Canucks. You can listen to this podcast on multiple platforms such as Anchor, Stitcher, Spotify,
Boofy,
Apple, and on YouTube. You can follow myself at Javm, Javm. Been getting into a bit more art as of late.
Yes, I saw that. I don't know what the thing you posted today was, but it was good.
Well, thank you. So if you like art, give me a follow on that. And your stuff, Steve.
You can follow me at FrostyLight on Twitter. That's where all of the stoof goes. If you ever want to know what I'm up to, just drop a follow over there and you will certainly know. Mostly been shitposting over there because I've been real spicy recently. But blogging type stuff also goes out there. Speaking of blogging type stuff, frostylight.ca, go read my blog. The big Breath of the Wild retrospective is out. I spent a very long time writing it, and my editor spent even longer editing it with me. Go read it. It's more organized version of the thought breakdown that I had with regard to Breath of the Wild when I was talking about it on the podcast. Wanted to write something about Dark Souls. I have not made much progress on that end because of a number of reasons. None of them involve other individuals. You know who you are if you're listening to this podcast. I've just been getting into my own way with regard to writing that one. But hopefully I'll have something about Dark Souls coming up on there, because I think Dark Souls is a rad-ass game, and I want to share some of my extended thoughts on why I think it's a rad-ass game with people. Other than that, you can follow me on, Instagram. It's also Frosty Light. That's where some art-related stuff goes, but I haven't really been doing art-related stuff recently, so maybe just go read the blog. That's it for me.
All right. Thank you all very much for joining us, and stay frosty.